Hey, this is former Blue Devil O-lineman Matt Skura. You're listening to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. Go Duke, go ACC.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back in Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name is Mike McDaniel. Season previews rolling on. We talked about Stanford last night. At least that's when I recorded it. I don't know if it's been released yet. But we're talking Cal today. Matt Moreno joining us once again, second year in a row. He's part of Golden Bear Report, publisher over there for On3 Rivals. Join us for the second year in a row to help us preview Cal, the notable ACC school. Matt, what's going on? How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. A lot of fun last year, so it was an easy message to send. Have you back on. There is a lot to talk about with Cal, a ton. The obvious is Justin Wilcox and his status, but there's a lot more that's going into that, I think. Number one, we have a co-AD situation. We had an athletic director retirement. We have a co-AD situation. We have a hiring of Ron Rivera as the general manager. We have just general pressure on Wilcox. And then we have an offensive coordinator change, right? Brian Harsin now in the fold, changing personnel, lot going on. Let's start with the Cal athletic department, obviously being in a little bit of flux. How does this impact Justin Wilcox and the outlook, I guess, of the football program and what expectations are heading into the season?
Yeah, I mean, Justin Wilcox is kind of the only thing that's similar about last season right now. It feels like There's so many different players, there's different staff, and so it's been really interesting to see this offseason play out. But I think all of it amounts to just added pressure to win right now, and I think that's what every move was made for. It was made to help breathe some life into this football program. They haven't had a winning season since 2019. And that needs to change. He still has some years on his contract. And so he's not in any necessarily position to where he has to play for his contract. It's not a contract year for Justin Wilcox, but they need to start winning. And so that is what it comes down to. And I think anything that you saw play out through the course of this offseason led up to how can you breathe life into not only the football program, but Cal athletics. And that's something with Ron Rivera stepping in. He's been really focused on. It's not just about football. We need to breathe life into football and make that a moneymaker to, have this entire athletic department kind of stay afloat. If you look at the numbers, they're one of the programs that is in the most amount of debt. They had to redo the stadium to retrofit it for earthquakes. And that's something that happens out here in California. And so that cost a lot of money to do. And so they've kind of been in debt for a long time, obviously taking a pay cut to move into the ACC. It was kind of, one of those situations where they needed to stay in a Power 5, Power 4 conference to survive and have athletics survive. And so to do that, you had to, make some concessions. And one of those was taking less money from the ACC to, join that conference. And so a lot of things working against Cal. It's in a very difficult position. And so, that was one of the things that, we talked to Ron Rivera a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned, I think that Justin Wilcox was working at a great disadvantage these last few years because he just didn't have the resources that he needed to run a successful team. And so I think he's getting some leeway from Ron Rivera. I don't think that it's one of those situations where he comes in going hey, if you don't win X amount of games, we're moving on. But I know the fan base feels that way. The fan base feels hey, if they don't have a successful season, it's time to move on. And so I think there is some pressure. I think, as camp has played out, you sense, there is a sense of urgency with this team. And you can feel that with the players and the coaching staff. And I think even with Justin Wilcox, he's tired of answering the questions about, close losses and one score games and not coming out on the winning end of those. And, every coach, I think this time of year is going to say oh yeah, if we, would have won this game or would have won that game, it's a completely different season. But it's been that way for a few years under Justin Wilcox. And so I think fans are kind of, getting to the point where they're hey, the rubber needs to meet the road here, and you need to start winning some of these games. And I think Justin Wilcox feels that as well. And so everything that's happened this offseason, I think, has really been a culmination of hey, this football team needs to win games. And, when we were talking to Ron Rivera, he mentioned there's 3 components of the season that he's really looking at, whether, it comes down to making a decision with Justin Wilcox or really anybody within the staff or the program. He said, first and foremost is wins and losses. They need to win games. that's one of the components that he's going to be looking at when he looks at what they need to assess after the season. TV viewing and having, he calls it eyeballs on their team. And then people in the stands and growing that, in stadium experience and having more fans in the stands, I think is a big part of what they want to do. And so, as you look at the season, if you look at those three components and they're not winning games, if the TV viewing isn't what it needs to be, which is obviously you're going to have to take that from somebody else, but you can look at the stadium and see if there's people in the stands. And so if any one of those, a combination of those three things or any one of those three things is not up to par, I think you can then begin seriously looking at like, okay, what's going to happen, after the season with the staff and the future of this program.
I think that's all fair. Certainly Cal was in an interesting position having to do what they did and join the ACC essentially at a discount. And just because of the position they were in with the Pac-12 really folding up, trying to resurrect the conference. The conference now, it's a group of 5 league. I mean, that's what it is at this point. How much of all of this, and I'm just talking general state of college football over the last few years, do you think fed into Jim Knowlton stepping down?
Jim Knowlton has not been a popular guy around Cal athletics, around the fan base in particular. The fan base, he's had some controversies around him. There's been some scandals within the, the program under his watch. And so pretty serious things. And so I think a lot of the fan base was not supportive of him. I think the thing that you saw kind of transpire over the course of the offseason was that the donors were really, he had lost that group in a big way. And so it was one of those situations where something needed to happen. I think he probably understood that. I think everybody, around the program understood that. And so it eventually led to him stepping down before, his contract was expired, and retiring is what he went with. And that was the, official words from everybody within the program was that he retired. But you can't deny that there was pressure from, from outside sources, including donors, where, there was a big push like, hey, we are going to withhold our money and not donate to this university until, something is done about Jim Knowlton. And so that's how it played out. And I know it was kind of sold nationally as like everybody wanted Ron Rivera to take over the program and have, full authority to do whatever he wanted. It was, yes, I think so. I think fans really like Ron Rivera. They know that he bleeds, blue and gold, and he wants to do what's best for the program, and he understands the landscape. But I think there was a lot of displeasure with what Jim Knowlton did during his tenure at Cal. And so it was a lot about that. It was a lot about just, hey, let's get anybody different running this athletic department. And so that's kind of what led to it. In a lot of ways, you have to think, again, it was a retirement, but there was a lot of pressure, I think, from outside of like, hey, something needs to be done soon to get this program going in the right direction.
Fair enough. Just trying to shake things up a little bit, Ron Rivera as GM. It's interesting seeing the general manager role now in the revenue sharing era and what that impact looks like. Because, some programs are handling it like, all right, the GM reports to the head coach. Then there's others where it's, oh, actually the GM's running the program. And with both Stanford and Cal, Stanford with Andrew Luck and Cal with Rivera, it does seem like it's general manager running the program. It's, they're kind of the intermediary, right, in a perfect world between the athletic director and the football coach. Kind of like a pro model, which, college athletics really is kind of moving towards that with they are with the revenue sharing. How are fans taking that? Rivera is a very popular guy at Cal, I think, right? So how are fans taking that? Do they think that the Rivera addition will help things as far as the future of the football program? Obviously, the athletic department believes that, but from the fans' perspective, do they believe that Ron Rivera will be the right guy to lead a coaching search if it comes to that, if he does choose to move on from Justin Wilcox?
Absolutely. I think if you would have polled Cal fans and said who would be the best guy to bring in for this job, I think you would find it would be Ron Rivera in a lot of cases. And so, I think they're overjoyed that it's Ron Rivera and that he has now been given the opportunity to have that kind of full authority to kind of really do whatever he needs to do to get the program to where it needs to be. And so, it was an interesting kind of power dynamic when he was first brought in, because Justin Wilcox was still reporting to Jim Knowlton, the athletic director, and Ron Rivera is reporting to Rich Lyons, the chancellor. And so it was really interesting. But now it's kind of more streamlined, where it's like there is a clear kind of pecking order here and a clear order of kind of how this all goes. And it's like, Ron Rivera is in charge of this program and is pulling a lot of the strings behind the scenes. He's got his hands in a lot of different things. He's leaving the coaching up to Justin Wilcox. We talked to him, like I said, recently, and that was asked, like, where are you going to be on the field, and where are you going to be, on game days, and are you going to have influence over decisions that are going on the field? And he really said, like, I'm going to stay hands off. I will have input. He kind of said, whether Justin Wilcox wants to hear it or not, I will have input on what I think, my suggestions about how things could go better. But in terms of personnel and who should be on the field, who shouldn't be on the field, he's going to be hands off in those situations. And, Justin Wilcox and his staff are still going to handle that. They're still going to do the day-to-day coaching. Ron Rivera isn't somebody who's out on the field every single day, looking over everyone's shoulder, saying like coaching, giving coaching points to players or things like that. He is watching, and he's, somebody that is kind of at practice and present and able to kind of view things and see how the development of the team is going. But he isn't somebody who's breathing down Justin Wilcox's neck and going like, hey, you need to do this and you need to do that. He said that was an issue, though, early on when he first arrived in the spring. He was like, the first couple of practices, he was like, I was giving pointers to the linebackers, and then he realized, oh, that's not necessarily my job. Like, there's coaches to do that. And so he admitted that it has been difficult to really be hands off, but he wants to take that approach and really, leave the coaching up to the coaches. And I think Justin Wilcox really appreciates that, because as I talked to him last year, and he kind of just almost gave me a look when I asked this question, because I said, is kind of the appeal of bringing in a GM that you can just coach football? Because I think anybody who has gotten to know him understands, like, that is what he's doing this for. He wants to coach football. He doesn't necessarily want to go to these fundraiser events and be the face of, this program and be the guy that's out there and, shaking everybody's hands and being like, hey, come to the games and do all. I think he just really wants to coach football. And so, what this has done is allowed him to do that. Ron Rivera is now that guy. Ron Rivera is at all these speaking engagements and really rallying support for the program. And so I think it's been a really, really probably positive dynamic for those two and for Justin Wilcox to really focus on what he needs to do. But I think that there's it's been an interesting, element to see that play out. But there's a very clear kind of power dynamic in play here and how it plays out and what it looks like. And I think fans have been really appreciative of, like, hey, there's a clear picture of who is responsible if things don't go well in certain situations. Like, hey, if the roster isn't built right and, you paid this guy too much money, let's say, like, that comes back to Ron Rivera. Like, he understands, like, he's part of making those decisions now where, on-field stuff is going to be a lot of Justin Wilcox. So I think there's a very clear picture. And I think, again, fans really like Ron Rivera. They understand that he is passionate about the program. His wife was on the board of the collective, has, strong ties to the program as well. And so it's not like he's been away. It's not like he has, I'm just coming back to like save everything. Like, he's been involved in different ways for many years. And so he understands, what the challenges are, what the process needs to look like. And so I think that's where fans just wanted somebody like that. It didn't necessarily have to be Ron Rivera, but I think there's a lot of fans that are very excited that it is Ron Rivera because of how much he cares, about the school and the program.
That's fair. How much of a role? I mean, he's the guy who's trying to like drum up support, right, in terms of all the stuff that takes place outside of football, fundraising events, all that stuff. How much of a role is he playing in player personnel? Because this answer is, I mean, I think for some fans listening to this are gonna be like, oh, it's obvious he's a GM, he's got to have a role in player personnel. It's not happening that way everywhere. The GM role is a little bit dynamic. It's, some places it's more like fundraising, doing the stuff that the head coach really doesn't want to do. And other places it's been like, okay, you're real heavy in player personnel. I'm thinking kind of like Mike Lombardi at UNC with Belichick. He's pretty much the player personnel guy. I mean, they're really going with the pro model. So what is, as best as you understand it, is Rivera playing a heavy hand in personnel?
I think he's aware of who they want. I think he is playing a role in the sense of like, yeah, that guy looks good. I like the way this guy looks, and being like, yeah, this is somebody that we should take. A lot of the player personnel stuff is going to still remain with their director of player personnel, Marshall Sherrington. He's just somebody who's done it for a long time, really, had his hands in kind of building these rosters over the years. And Marshall has done a good job of, building out his own staff, and they've expanded that. They've added some roles over the last couple of years. And I think that a lot of that will fall on him. And so I think and Ron Rivera has been open about that. Like, hey, I let them do their jobs. I think that's a big part of what he wants to do. Is he doesn't want to micromanage everybody. I think he wants to let everybody kind of do their jobs. It's all about hiring the right people and getting the right people in those positions, taking in information. Because again, the college aspect is new to him in that regard, and like understanding what talent is out there. And so I think he's been smart in that he isn't coming in and saying like, I know everything and I'm gonna make sure I think he's doing his research and learning players. And I think maybe in years to come, you'll see maybe him take an even greater role because he'll understand the players more. He'll have seen more of these players and have a better feel for like, okay, this transfer portal player is somebody that really does fit what we want to do. At least for now, I think he's leaving a lot of that up to the staff and going like, okay, who are the options that you guys like? Who does the staff like? Who does, Marshall like? And who does, the recruiting and player personnel staff really like? Who are the guys that we should be targeting? Okay, let me see what those guys look like on film. Do they fit? Understanding what the coaching staff wants, because under Brian Harsin, the guys that he wants to fit his system don't necessarily fit what Mike Blesh had last year and what Jake Spavital had the year before. Like there is some different elements in play here, and so I think he's like, all right, let me understand what the coaches want, and then I can better feel like, okay, this is what we can do, and then be part of those negotiations. I think it is a collective effort. I think he understands what they're looking for. I think they do, in some ways get his sign off on, the players and okay, this is the guy. And this is the number more importantly, because, he has a big hand in the budget. The budget is the big thing with Ron Rivera. He understands the budget. And that's the biggest thing is he knows what money they have available, what they need to use, what everybody, how they kind of grade every position and some of those things and what that entails in terms of money. So I think he has his hand a lot more in that side than necessarily identifying players and be like, yes, this is the guy we want. Again, maybe that changes in the coming years as he starts to learn more about college players, high school recruiting, all those types of things. But this is his first cycle through all this. And he was pretty clear that he was overwhelmed at first. Like this was a lot to take in because he got thrown in right at the end of the spring transfer portal window. Or right as that was going on, is about to begin. And so he kind of got thrown right into it. And so I think he got hit over the head a little bit of like, hey, this is all that goes into all this and things happen fast. And so I think maybe as the years go on, you'll see him take maybe a bigger role in determining exactly what the roster looks like and who's on the roster. But for now, I think he's left a lot of that up to the staff. And I think his goal would be to leave a lot of that up to the staff, moving forward.
Yeah, the pool of players is certainly a lot larger in college football than it is in the NFL. The Brian Harsin addition at offensive coordinator is an interesting one. He's coordinated very good offenses before. He's coached very good teams before as a head coach. This is a big time win now hire for Wilcox. I mean, this is a move I wasn't necessarily anticipating Cal to go out and make. My immediate thought when Harsin was hired is, that's interesting. That's win now. There's like a sense of urgency with this hire. Is that how it was taken with the fan base? And how was the Harsin hire received? And then the second piece of it is in terms of personnel, because there's a lot there that we can get into, but in terms of personnel, does it match what he wants to run in this first year? Because this first year could be the only year, depending on Wilcox's fate, right? So it's really important that the players kind of fit what he wants to do.
Yeah, it was an interesting hire. I think I viewed it the same way you did, and I think a lot of people, in the Cal fan base viewed it that same way, where it's like, oh, this is again interesting, but also he's trying to make some moves. Like he doesn't want to have this is their fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. Like he doesn't want to have that. If there is, something to be sustained here, and if he is going to be here continue to be, here for a prolonged period, it's going to be because they have success on offense, and they cannot keep changing offensive coordinators every year, changing systems every year, and have that offensive success. It's just too difficult. And so this was, I think, if you ask people within the program, outside the program, people who watched, it was like, this is a very clear, I wouldn't say last ditch effort, but it was a clear, like, we need to make something happen this season. We can't wait. We can't prolong this. There is no, waiting for things to develop. Like, you need to win games. Their defense has been so good over the years, and the offense has let them down in many occasions. And so I think everyone who looks at, Justin Wilcox's entire tenure, you look at the defense, you go, that is solid. They're turning out pros, on that side of the ball.
Yeah.
But they continue to not have that happen on offense. Like there's a clear indication of if there's something wrong with this team, it's the offense, and they cannot, it hasn't been up to par with the defense. And so I agree. I think a lot of people agreed, like, no, this was his opportunity to be like, no, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to bring in maybe someone that fans aren't thrilled about. After seeing, what happened at Auburn, and it's not, somebody who's like, oh yeah, this is, I think every fan is like, oh, I want an up and comer, or I want a huge name that has been very successful. This isn't that. There's a big name, but the recent success isn't there. And so
Right.
I think a lot of fans were a little bit apprehensive about it and like, okay, I'm not sure what to think about this. There's things outside of football that maybe don't line up with things out here.
For
and
sure.
and so I think there was some hey, let's see what this is about. But I think fans have really got on board with what he's bringing to the table. The spring was interesting. Post spring ball, they have a lot of departures, and that's the big change has been the offensive staff. And so I think that maybe caught people off guard. But I think to your original point, I think there was the idea of like, no, this is a win now situation. This is him going like, no, I'm getting really serious about this. We're not going to play around. Like, I need somebody, I think more importantly, somebody who understands what he's about. They have a long history together, going back to Boise State, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator situation, when their careers are really just getting going. And so they have a lot of connections. People within this new staff have some connections, that go back to, those Boise State days. And so I think it was about, I'm going to stop trying to piece this together with like guys I think will work or who fits like the right hire at the right time. They got put in a tough position with Mike Blesh, where it was like, the team was like, we want Mike Blesh. We want somebody we know. And so, Justin Wilcox didn't really know him beyond that first year when he arrived, with Spavital. And so, they didn't have that true connection. So I think now it's like, no, I'm going to hire somebody that knows exactly what I want to do. I know exactly how he works, what he's going to demand. And so I think there's a lot of that within that hire for Justin Wilcox. And I think he was like, I'm going to ignore kind of anything else that comes with it. There's going to be noise that comes with it. But this is who I want, running my offense. And so I think that was a big part of it. But yeah, I think it was a clear, hey, this is a decision to win football games in 2025.
Yeah, if you're going to go down swinging, and maybe even more importantly, go down with somebody right, and that you've had, prior coaching history with, and there's going to be at least a little bit of continuity even from the past, even if you are new to the staff here. Quarterback, so Mendoza was really a lot of fun to watch last year, and then he transfers out of the program, and Devin Brown transfers in. I know there's some freshmen. Like, what is going on with the quarterback battle? Has Cal officially named a starting quarterback? How has that looked in camp?
Yeah, as of this recording, no. I would love to tell you how it's looked in camp. Since the spring, they have been pretty much off limits, and they do not show us very much of anything. And so it would be great to tell you exactly how it's going from day to day. We've gotten to watch about 10 minutes of about 4 practices so far, midway through training camp. And it caused some friction with the media early on. And Justin Wilcox basically eventually gave up like, yeah, it's because we have a new offense, and, we don't want people to know what we're doing. So, but from the sounds of it, and from, what I've been able to gather and talking to different people who, have some information about what's going on within practice, it's still a battle. And so they just had their first scrimmage last weekend. They're going to have another one here this week. And then once they wrap things up, they're getting to the point where they're going to have to name somebody. It doesn't sound like they want to go with a 2-man kind of group. They're not going to, at least the plan isn't to go in with, playing both Devin Brown and Jaren Sangapolutele together. They don't want to play, them in game one and like, hey, let's see who does well. It feels like they want to have a starter. And so they want to have a starter named. Whether they announce that, we'll see. Based on how things have gone so far with Brian Harsin, I would imagine they don't announce anybody, but maybe we'll be surprised. My read on it, going back to the spring, because we did get to watch it, good amount in the spring, is that it'll be Devin Brown. I think that there's too much of an investment made. He has experience. They really like his leadership abilities. And I think if anybody who watches, college football and college sports in general, coaches really value experience and being able to like have seen what it looks like to play in a college game. And outside of Devin Brown, you just don't have that on this roster.
Yeah.
EJ Keminong, he played in the bowl game a little bit. He, as a true freshman, really struggled, but came on really strong in the spring and as a, second-year freshman. And, I thought, well, he did look like the most consistent guy throughout the course of spring ball. And so it was like, okay, because it's really interesting because that was kind of what Fernando looked like a couple of years ago. They had brought in some different transfers and you weren't really thinking about Fernando Mendoza. And then all throughout training camp, you're like, he looks like the most consistent guy. They played a transfer. They played Sam Jackson at that time. He ended up struggling and then getting injured. Midway through that, 2023 season, Fernando Mendoza comes in and he's like, oh, this guy like can play some ball. And if you watch all the training camp, you're like, yeah, this was what we saw for most of the training camp. And so right. I think coaches get a little bit antsy about having somebody who hasn't played a whole lot, which Fernando hadn't played, up until that point when he, made that start in the Oregon State game, really didn't have much experience. And so I think there is a little bit of a fear of like, hey, I don't want to throw somebody out there who doesn't have any experience. So I think that is why you'll likely end up seeing Devin Brown start the season. But Jaren has been a revelation in a lot of ways. He's obviously a highly touted guy. He was somebody that they wanted all along. He was committed to Cal, ended up signing with Oregon late because of, what went on. And there were so many departures right after the season. And he decided, I'm going to sign with Oregon. That's been my dream school. He had, a very strong relationship with Dylan Gabriel. And so he was like, I'm going to play at Oregon, signs with Oregon, goes and starts practicing there, and then leaves and enters the portal, ends up at Cal before, the winter semester even begins. And so he's somebody that Cal wanted all along. They saw the potential in him really even before he blew up in the summer. They were really, one of those schools that jumped into the mix before he, added a ton of offers last summer. And so that always meant something. But as he got into camp and as you saw him in the spring, you're like, oh, this guy might be ahead of schedule. I watched him quite a bit, over the summer, and I saw the flashes. I saw what Cal's coaching staff saw. But once he got on, with college teammates and on a team where he has, power forward level receivers, it was like, oh, this is different. This isn't your typical freshman. And that's kind of been the continued message as you go into training camp and as you talk to players, receivers, and even guys on defense in training camp. It's like he's doing things that not a lot of freshmen are doing. A little bit of a gunslinger mentality, which again, coaches don't love that. They don't love when you're taking chances. And he talked about that, during the first week of camp. He was like, I understand that I'm probably taking too many chances. It's just kind of the way I play, but I need to reel that in. I need to understand that, like, I don't have to make every single throw. And so Devin Brown is not that guy. Devin Brown is the guy who's going to throw the ball away and who's going to, take the 3-yard, rushing play versus, throwing an interception. And so I think that is probably working in his favor, just having that experience and that knowledge of like, hey, this is what coaches are looking for. This is the safe play versus the flash play. Fans love the flash play though. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, because I know fans are hearing this. They're understanding like Jaren is doing some special things in practice that they want to see. And so it'll be very interesting to see how much, if Devin has success, and obviously he's going to be their guy, but if there are those struggles, how much there is that push to get a guy like Jaren in the game because of what everyone has heard about what he's done in practice and, seen the flashes of in clips and highlights from practice and those types of things. And so at this point, I do think, it is Devin Brown's job. I think he'll end up being the guy that whether they announce it or not, I think he's the guy that is going to start against Oregon State. That's just the feeling I'm getting. But there's a lot of excitement about what Jaren will bring to the field when it's his time. And, that could be this season, who knows? But I think there's a lot of excitement about what he is and the type of player that they were able to, bring in there. But I'd say right now, it probably just based on so much newness, you got a new offense, you got all these things. And, we don't know a whole lot about what the offense is going to look like under Brian Harsin. He's kept that under wraps quite a bit. But the thing that, you hear a lot is pro style, and that fits a guy like, Devin Brown quite a bit, coming from Ohio State. Like there is just kind of parts of his game that really fit in well with what we've seen so far from this offense. And so I think he eventually wins that job, and we'll see what he does with it. Had some turnover issues in the spring when we were able to watch practice and of his own, really ran a lot more than I anticipated. And he kind of, every quarterback that isn't known as a runner likes to tout their ability to run. But he really was an effective runner. And it was something that I wasn't really expecting to see from him. And so, I think the offense fits him pretty well, and we'll see what it all looks like, once they take the field in the end of this month.
The ability to use his legs might end up being significant because the running back room is, you lose Mendoza at quarterback, but then Jaden Ott has, I think by all accounts, kind of a disappointing year last year. He's gone. Javion Thomas is gone. New pass catchers at receiver. Offensive line totally reworked. I know there's a ton of transfers coming in on the offensive line. So I guess high level, give us some names to watch at running back, receiver, and then give me an idea of how this offensive line is going to look.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch that play out because you have pretty much the entire running back room leave and transfer after spring ball. They brought in Julian Griffin from UTSA as their running backs coach. Really, they've only retained one offensive coach, tight ends coach. Mike Safell was able to stay and retain. He's a young guy, was an offensive lineman at Cal, really not that long ago, and made the transition to coaching and stepped in last year in his first year in a full-time role as their tight ends coach. And continues to be in that role. So they kept him, retained him, but everybody else is new, and they added Nick Rolovich as a senior assistant. So have some more head coaching experience on the staff.
Another interesting hire too, right?
Absolutely. And so you have some interesting dynamics at play, but I think fans were thrown off guard by, how many departures they had, especially I think yes, I think Javian Thomas was kind of the real shocker of the entire group because an Oakland guy, somebody with ties to the area, really had a lot of success last year, was going to be given that opportunity to be the number one guy once Jaden Knott decided to leave. So I think that one was the big surprise. And it wasn't, like he was going to in Oklahoma like Jaden Knott. I think you can understand like, Oklahoma, just in the world of revenue sharing NIL, is just going to be able to offer Jaden Knott more money. That situation felt a little bit more clear cut. Javian Thomas going to a place like UCLA, where that's it, within the state. That's a big rivalry between Cal and UCLA. Feel like they're very similar in a lot of ways. That was a little bit of a more difficult one, I think, for fans to swallow because it was like, well, you got everything you wanted right here, and so I think that was like, okay, what does this all mean? And so, losing a lot of the production. I think if you go down the receiver list, outside of Tron Grizel, like, you keep, I think, one of your top 12 receivers on the team from last year. It's just, it's really difficult. And so, losing Jack Andrews was another difficult one for Cal fans. He had really become the face of the team, and another guy, local guy, went from walk-on to this star player, was their leading receiver last year. I think everyone was like, oh, this guy can be like the face of the team. He can be that bridge from whatever last year was to this year and really, help kind of smooth things over and provide all these new faces with somebody who's, consistent. And so when he left, I think that was a big one too for this team. Obviously losing Fernando in the winter was a big deal and kind of sent the whole offseason into a little bit of a disarray. But in terms of what they brought in, I think they really like what they've brought in. They really valued speed. They lost a lot of receivers after the spring as well. A lot of guys that were taller. Tobias Merriweather from Notre Dame ended up leaving, going to Utah. And so that was somebody I think they banked on, or at least fans banked on. Hey, this is going to be a playmaker. He got injured last year late in camp and wasn't able to really kind of stretch his wings like they thought he would. Early on in camp, he looked amazing and looked like the true number one receiver that they've been missing. And so, losing him, I think, was another difficult one. But they add somebody like Jacob DeJesus from UNLV, who really, did some damage against them in the bowl game. They played against UNLV in the LA Bowl. Jacob DeJesus is the MVP of that game. It really did some good things on special teams. Another area guy, not from Monteca, not really too far away from, Berkeley. And so just really, a vital piece to what they want to do. I think when you look at kind of, again, what we've been able to see, they want to utilize that speed. They bring in a guy like Coron Adams from South Dakota, who was originally at Iowa State, another inside receiver. So it looks like they want to do a lot with the inside receiver spots. They want to do a lot with those slot guys, whether it is just getting them passes or using them, in running plays and doing some different things like that. And so those are two guys to watch out for. Tron Grizel as well. Like I said, he's going to be their number one, top returning receiver. I mean, a really versatile guy, a bigger guy, but can play in the slot. They like him in the slot quite a bit. Probably going to play more outside than anticipated this year just because of all the departures. But another interesting story, somebody who was a walk-on and really kind of just carved out a path for himself and, had a big game against Stanford a couple of years ago and really, has emerged as somebody that, quarterbacks really like, that the team really likes. And so I would imagine he's going to be a pretty impactful player, but somebody that I'm really excited to see this season and see what he does is former Ohio State transfer Keon Grays. He came in last year and was kind of a big name, but hadn't really done a whole lot at Ohio State. And then showed up for training camp and you're like, oh, this guy is a cut above. Like you would just watch drills and you go, oh, he's different than what they've had before. They obviously had several defensive backs drafted. He would go up against those guys and beat those guys. And you're like, oh, this is a difference maker for them. And so look great. Last week of training camp gets hurt and is down for a while. I just talked to him this week. He said it was supposed to be an 8-month injury. Ended up only being like 2 months that he was able to get back. But, they were just cautious with him. Only played in 2 games. Didn't really get his feet wet. I think he played 16 snaps in those 2 games. Just didn't get to see him a whole lot. But he looks great. Physically, he looks, where he should be. He looks better than I think last year. And, what little bit we have seen, he's been really impressive. Obviously, has that relationship with Devin Brown going back to Ohio State. They've known each other. I think that connection is going to be important, assuming Devin Brown is going to be the quarterback. And so I think that's one of those guys that I'm going to be really interested to see and really excited to see kind of what he does this year. Running back is a whole different story. Well, I guess not. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces, but very, very few returning pieces. It's all new to us. Obviously not being able to really watch too much of training camp, haven't really seen what a lot of these guys can do. And so Brandon High came over from UTSA, obviously has that true connection with Julian Griffin, who was his former coach there. Seems like he's going to end up being a starter. At least, that's kind of how it feels right now. Kendrick Raphael from NC State made the move over. ACC move. LJ Johnson coming over from SMU, another ACC move. And so those are kind of going to be their, 3 main guys. Jamal Wiley was the lone scholarship holdover from last season. At one point, it's kind of like that Will Smith Fresh Prince meme where like he's looking around and going like, I'm the only guy left in this room at one point in the spring. I mean, that was it. And then they had an incoming freshman, Anthony Leak, who I really like, a 4-star guy who did some really good things in high school, kind of a workhorse, but they're going to bring him along more slowly probably at this point. But that was kind of it. And so they had to go out and find some guys. And I think their biggest thing was finding guys that fit what they want to do. Talking to Ron Rivera, talking to some of the coaches, it sounds like they found the right group that they like. Obviously, you're going to expect the coaching staff to say that when you lose so many pieces, you lose so many beloved players like Jaden Knott, Javian Thomas, you're going to be like, yeah, of course we got what we wanted. But they really do seem to think that they are in a better spot with the group they have now in terms of the overall running back unit and how it fits what they want to do exactly. This is my perspective, me saying it from the outside. Talent is probably not the same.
Just for sure.
Pure talent, but
hard to replace those guys.
Yeah. And maybe they would not agree with that, but I think talent is not the same. But I can kind of be sold on the fact that I think they do probably fit what they want to do a little bit better. And so I think there is some optimism there that group can be successful. I think the connection with somebody like Brandon High, assuming he ends up being kind of their lead running back, and what he has with Julian Griffin, like Julian Griffin knows what his tendencies are because they worked together at their previous school. And so I think that probably is something that leads to some success. We'll see what happens with some of those other guys. Maybe somebody like Anthony League, the freshman, comes on and has a Jaden Knott-like role. And obviously Jaden came on pretty early on as a freshman and did some things and flash, and you go, okay, this guy can be the next in line. And so we'll see what happens there. I don't hate the group though. I do think that they're probably in a better position in terms of what they want to do and what they want to accomplish within this offense with those guys. And sometimes it's more about the scheme fit than necessarily the talent. I think that's what they're banking on right now. Offensive line wise, kind of the same deal. This is kind of across the board offense is like, you're going to see a lot of new faces. I will admit, I cover these guys. I covered their transfer portal commitments, all those things. Day one, I was like, I don't know a lot of these faces. It was really a stark kind of realization of like, I pay attention to this team. I know what they should look like. I know who these players are. And I was like, this is interesting because I don't know. There's not a lot of familiar faces that I'm seeing out here at practice. And so I think for fans, it's going to be an adjustment. Obviously, that's across college football. Like, that's just how it goes. But in particular, at a place like Cal, where you don't have, endless amounts of money, or you're just trying to kind of fit together a roster. And sometimes it's going to be lower level guys that you're not familiar with. That's kind of what the picture looks like. So I think there's going to be an adjustment for fans. But offensive line wise, there are some interesting pieces. And so, they return Siwape Vadakani, who was their right guard. He's battled some injuries the last couple seasons, but really important piece, one of the kind of returning starters for this group. But across the board really has been wholesale changes. And so Tyson Ruffins is a really interesting one. I think they're really excited about what he brings to the table. Undersized a little bit, was at Nevada, under recruited out of Long Beach Poly High School, Deshaun Jackson's high school. But I think they really like what he brings to the table. They start him out at center, probably going to be ending up moving out to guard. But I really think they like what they have with him as somebody who could really, do some things up front. Lamar Robinson comes over from Georgia State. And it looks like right now he's probably leader in the clubhouse to play center for them. doing some good things, kind of got that job in the spring and has carried it over into training camp. Nick Morrow is going to be the interesting one at left tackle. I know fans have mixed opinions on Nick Morrow, a little bit of an undersized tackle in terms of weight, but height and length and all that, he's got it. He looks the part in that way. He's a tall guy, but was really young, got thrown into the fire at left tackle, had some issues at times. Missed the spring, missed a lot of games last year. Going to be one of those guys that it's really going to be interesting to see kind of what happens and how he bounces back. I know the staff seems to really like what he brings to the table. Right now, that's who I bet would be their left tackle, starting left tackle. Everything else a little bit up for grabs.
Yeah.
Braden Miller is a former Michigan State transfer, and they like what they have at right tackle with him, I think. So it looks like he'll probably be that guy there. But again, because we have seen so little, it'll be very interesting to see what it all looks like once they actually take the field against Oregon State. Maybe there's some guys that we're not even talking about that are going to be part of this rotation. I do know that Famika and their new offensive line coach, came over from New Mexico during the offseason. He likes to have a rotation. I think he likes to have some different bodies in there and try some different combinations and figure out where they want to go. I think Brian Harsin maybe has some different ideas about that. When we talked to him, it was like, well, I kind of want to have my set group of guys, so it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out and whether or not, they have a pretty steady rotation, or they settle on like, hey, this is our group of 5. This is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to go into the season. But a lot of change is the story on offense for Cal this season.
So there's going to be a lot of questions on offense. Well, at least at the outset, and we'll see what it looks like, right? At most position groups, new quarterback, new running back, new receivers, reworked offensive line. Defense, I mean, you've got to replace Noel Williams in the secondary. And I'm not going to just sit here and say it's a really easy thing to do, because it's not, because of how good of a player he was. But Kedu Luave is back at linebacker. There's some certainty, at least in the front 7, with, returning starters. And I guess, is replacing Williams the biggest question for this defense? Because it does seem like there is a lot more continuity on that side of the ball, at least at the outset, than there is on offense.
I would say replacing Noel Williams, but really replacing a lot of their secondary. I mean, they lost their entire starting secondary. That's just the reality of the situation. You had 4 guys drafted on defense. 3 of those guys were in the secondary. Craig Woodson was one of those guys who I think people forgot about from season to season, because he wasn't the 7 interception guy like somebody like Noel Williams, but he was a big guy in run support, had a ton of tackles, was really a leader of that defense in a lot of ways. So replacing him. Marcus Harris was on the other side of Noel Williams, had a lot of success, another guy who got drafted. So yes, I think replacing Noel Williams is a big part of it. But that's a difficult thing to do. Noel Williams was on a different level for Cal last season. And he was getting interception after interception, making plays all over the field. So that was almost out of the norm. Kind of what you're going to get with this scheme with Justin Wilcox in the secondary. Those guys are going to be featured a lot. You're going to have success there. Right now, it's about figuring out who those guys are. And I can't really tell you like that. I don't know if the coaching staff could tell you. I know that sounds like there's been a lot of different combinations tried out right now, trying to figure out exactly what pieces fit. There's a nice collection of returners. They've brought in a lot of transfers, newcomers. You could see a freshman like Jayon Young out there, which he was kind of a revelation in the spring, a guy who came out early on as a mid-year enrollee. Again, I'm not thinking, hey, if you're going to replace Noel Williams, you replace him with a true freshman. But he played a lot during the spring, and I don't get the sense that is really kind of tapered off very much. And it sounds like he's still very much in the conversation too. I don't know if he would start, but I think he's definitely in the conversation to contribute this year at cornerback. Which is really a bizarre thing to say, an interesting to say, but I know he's been impressive. And so that's someone to keep an eye on. But the 2 transfers, Hezekiah Massis from FIU came over in the spring, really looked the part. Not Noel Williams, but a very nice replacement piece, and somebody I think can do a lot of things for them. Interesting in that similar personalities, not a guy who liked to talk a lot. I did an interview with him. I was like, oh, this reminds me of somebody, because Noel Williams was not a big talker. Noel Williams was like, I'll let my game do the talking. I'm going to keep it short when I answer questions and all those types of things. And I was like, oh, these are kind of some Noel Williams vibes in terms of just personality. And I think that's important. I think that helped Noel Williams to kind of have that mentality of like, hey, now I'm here to work. And so Zeke Massis kind of has that ability to him. I think he's going to be somebody that you see probably in that Noel Williams role. But Brent Austin from South Florida is somebody they brought in, a West Coast guy, California guy, who they're very excited about. In the highlights of their scrimmage, he had an interception in that practice. And so I think you hear the buzz coming out about him and you're like, okay, maybe they found their pieces. Yeah, they don't have Noah Williams, but if you have a couple guys that maybe can replicate, what he was able to do, to replicate what an All-American can do, one All-American can do, you can get a couple guys to kind of replace that. And so it feels like those are a couple guys that they really like, who seem to position themselves well heading into the season at the cornerback spots. I feel pretty comfortable with those two guys if I'm Cal. I think the interesting thing is going to be the safety position. There's a lot of different bodies there. Drew Polidori from Montana State came in the spring, a big guy, probably looking at somebody that could replace Craig Woodson. I figure he's probably going to be part of that starting group as well. The other positions are going to be up for grabs. They brought in some different guys. Tristan Dunn from Washington was really impressive during the spring. Has great ball skills and is somebody that I think can go out and get them some interceptions at safety. They have some different players that are going to be very, very interesting. Cam Sidney is somebody that you always hear about every year. Went to Mater Dei High School out here in California. Kind of always thought of as like the top high school program in the country. Yep. Definitely the top in California. Then St. John Bosco kind of go back and forth, but has that pedigree and is somebody that you hear about every season. And whether it's an injury or just emergence of somebody else ahead of him on the depth chart, he just doesn't necessarily get to shine as much as the coaches have always thought he could. He could be in a great position to do some things this year. And so he's somebody I would keep an eye on. Cam Sidney, in that secondary, I think is going to be a really interesting piece. But yeah, it's a very interesting group. The safeties in particular is where I think there's still some things up for grabs. You probably even going into the season start to see some different rotations in there, just because I still think there's probably some things that need to get figured out with that safety group in terms of who's going to be, the right guy and figuring out the right combinations to play. But Zeke Masses and Brent Austin are the two guys on the corner that I think are going to be, those two key pieces for them on that defense to try and replace what Noah Williams brought to the table.
That's all fair. It's hard to replace Noah Williams, let alone most of your secondary. Front seven, having a lot of returners, I guess, certainly helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for Cal, it's the inside linebacker spot is always going to be important. And when you look at what they do and what they've done, there's that inside linebacker spot, that middle linebacker has always been a key part and for years. And so having Cade Uluave come back, I know there were when there were a lot of departures in the spring, I think there were a lot of fans who were like
waiting for it.
Waiting for the last shoe to drop and go like, when's Cade transferring? I mean, everyone I think had resigned to the fact like, hey, that was going to happen. So getting him to come back, he's mentioned it, like he understands the importance of his return and what it means. I think there's going to be a lot on his shoulders to really live up to kind of what they've had at the position. He's had an interesting career. Was brought in as a linebacker, but they had so much depth at inside linebacker his freshman season that he actually started as a running back. Like the first couple of weeks of training camp, he would start as a running back, even though that he was never going to play there. The whole goal was to eventually have him play, linebacker.
Right.
Some injuries end up happening. He ends up being a starter at inside linebacker about midway through the season, and then wins Pac-12 Freshman of the Year on defense that year as a freshman after starting training camp as a running back. And so, had bad in his first season, had some injuries last year, and now he's into his junior year, trying to finally play an entire full season. I think if they can get that from him, if you can get all 12 games, he gives them something that nobody else can on this defense. And so I think having that back, you mentioned the front seven, like a lot of the defensive line is returned. I think that's important. Aiden Keanu-Aina from Notre Dame, a transfer that they got last year, really, again, was another revelation. Didn't really get a ton of opportunities at Notre Dame and is one of those guys that I think the transfer portal, like you hear so many bad things about the transfer portal and what it means, but like somebody like Aiden Keanu-Aina is like a great story for the transfer portal because he had no bad feelings. He had no, it was just like, hey, the opportunity wasn't there. This is going to be my opportunity. Let me figure it out. And he really has relished that and taken advantage of that opportunity at Cal and has become a true, big piece of this defense. So having someone like that back, TJ Bowler is another guy on the inside that they were able to bring in last year as a transfer, going into his second year with the team up front. Like there's just a lot of pieces along that defensive line that are important to have. Ryan McCullough as an outside linebacker, edge rusher. I think that he is looking like a guy that's like, oh, he's ready to really break out and have a big season. An outside linebacker. They need to kind of figure out that other outside linebacker position. But for 3 of the 4 spots up front, they're going to be set and they'll be fine. They have depth. They have guys to play those positions, and so I think that's a great starting point for this defense, especially when you have some uncertainty in the back end. But going back to the inside linebacker spot, Boom Jock from Colorado State, who had over 100 tackles last year, came in the spring. Harrison Taggart. Been hearing some great things about Harrison Taggart. Again, I haven't been able to see him live because he came after the spring. But there's been some thoughts of like the tandem of Harrison Taggart and Kedu Luave is going to drive some teams crazy at inside linebacker. It's kind of the vibe that I'm getting right now, just because of how aggressive they are. They kind of have some familiarity going back to their time in the state of Utah, playing high school football and all that in Utah. So they have some familiarity with one another, and it's a really strong inside linebacker group. And you look at the tandems that they could play, the combinations they could play, and you're like, they have something there. At times last year, it was like Teddy Buchanan was it. It was like if Teddy Buchanan wasn't making, doesn't have 15 tackles a game, like you're in a world of hurt. And so losing him obviously to the NFL is a big blow, but I think having some continuity there with Cade and what they brought in around him, I think is going to be a very, very successful recipe for that inside linebacker group. And, on the larger scale, the whole defense.
Yeah, should help the secondary out too, just having a good pass rush and not missing a lot of tackles in front, hopefully. Schedule, workable. I mean, if you're in a lame duck situation or you're in a must-win situation, however we want to coin it, it is nice to miss Miami. It's nice to miss Clemson. It's nice to not have to draw Notre Dame as part of the kind of pseudo ACC schedule with Notre Dame's agreement with the conference. There's some stuff to like here. Now, I understand you got to travel to Louisville. SMU is still on the schedule. So, I mean, there is certainly some tough games here. But as far as a conference schedule, I mean, this ended up, I think, working out pretty well for Cal in terms of what they drew and kind of a win now situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at it, I think there's only one ranked team. I think that'd be SMU that's in the preseason rankings right now.
Yeah.
And so, you can't complain if you're Cal about the schedule. I mean, I think most people look at that and go, that's an easy schedule. I don't know, college coaches may differ, and Justin Wilcox probably like, no, there are a lot of challenging teams on this schedule. But I think if you're a fan, you look at it, you go, that's an easy schedule. And so they definitely got some favors there. And if they don't have the success that they want this season, the schedule cannot be part of that equation. They can't use that as like an excuse that, hey, we had a tough schedule, because it just isn't. They get a lot of, good teams at home, and which is nice. They'll have them in Berkeley. They get to play North Carolina in Berkeley on a Friday night. And so that's maybe the difficult part of the schedule right there. But I think you go to Virginia Tech that next week. But I mean, if you look at the entire schedule, it's not bad. It's not bad. And if you're a team trying to, win some games and stack some victories early in the year, it's a pretty easy schedule. So I think a lot of fans feel that way. I think, again, the feeling is kind of what I said earlier. Fans, I think, are maybe getting to the point where they're like, all right, let's see what Justin Wilcox really has, what he can do, because we're getting a little bit antsy here. We don't like all this losing. And so I think fans are coming from that perspective of like, hey, you can't use the schedule as an excuse. Like, if you're not winning games on this schedule, like, there is something wrong here. And so there is that pressure. That's the kind of flip side of having the easy schedule. Like, you're going to be expected to win some games here. And if you don't, it's a sign of some real problems. And so I think that's how fans are approaching it. But yeah, I agree. I think it's a favorable schedule for Cal for sure. The early non-conference is not too difficult at all. Go on the road to San Diego State could be a little bit of a tricky game maybe. But outside of that, I think you have a favorable schedule. Like I said, a lot of the bigger names on that schedule you're playing at, at home at California Memorial Stadium. So not a lot of complaints, I don't think, coming from Berkeley about that schedule right now.
What is it going to take? I wanted to save this question for the end because we talked about Wilcox so much at the beginning of the podcast. I want to save this for the end. Is there a win threshold, in your opinion, that saves his job? Like, is it getting to 6, or does it have to be a winning record given the schedule? Like, what do you think the temperature is there? And I know there's other, you talked about Rivera earlier. There's other stuff outside of the wins and losses. You mentioned the fan attendance, eyeballs, on the team. But, is there a win threshold, you think? Is it 6, just getting back to a bowl game? Is it 7, just given how the schedule looks just on paper, 10,000 foot view? I mean, what's your gauge on that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. That's something I've tried to really kind of probe about and figure out exactly, is there a number? Is there a clear number?
Right.
And everyone's been, kind of playing and going like, yeah, like we'll see. There haven't been clear answers on like, hey, it's a hard fast, like he has to get 6 wins or he's out. I think for one, he can't stumble out of the gate. Yeah. Like you have to win games. You can't have a loss where you're like, oh, we should have won that game against whoever. Oregon State's going to be an interesting test because I think a lot of fans are expecting like, oh, you're going to just dominate Oregon State. Oregon State could be a tricky game. going to Corvallis is tricky to start the season. So, you can't stumble out of the gate. I think that's number one. If that happens, then we're going to have the conversation gets a little bit more serious after that point if you stumble against Oregon State. And so if you can get into that second half of the season, unscathed, or at least, with one loss there, then I think you're in a good spot. But I think it's all about how the start looks. If they look like they're making progress, if they look like they're in very close games and maybe lose a game here or there, I think they'll be fine. I still think it's going to take a winning record. I don't think 6 gets it done. They had 6 last year. They've had 6 before. That just feels like the norm. And I get that maybe some people are like, hey, that's just what Cal football is. They're a 6-win team. They're a 500 team. That's just what you are. But fans still remember those days of Marshawn Lynch and Aaron Rodgers. And that's like what they come back to. And they go, we know. And even after that, like there was teams that were very good. There's some teams early on under Justin Wilcox that were very good. And so I think fans are like, no, we know that this team is capable of doing more than that. And so I think it's probably 7 wins. If you can get to 7 wins, I think you probably see more of Justin Wilcox. I think you start to see kind of some things building. I'm still not, I haven't fully convinced myself they can do that. Again, it's been difficult just because I haven't been able to see the team develop. I think there's just so many new pieces that it's going to be, I think, a bit more of a challenge than people think, even with the schedule, just because there are so many moving parts. The quarterback situation, I'm not sold on that quite yet either. And so it'll be interesting to see it all play out. But I think 7 wins probably gets you some more Justin Wilcox. I think it probably secures him for next season. But it feels like they want to get over that 500 hump. They don't want to get to 6 games and be like, hey, that's what we are as Cal football. I think they're trying to avoid that. They want something better. They want to have, they want to be a winning program. And so I think that has to start now. I think you can feel that kind of internal pressure a little bit more right now, based on, the moves they've made and just kind of the conversations going on. And so I think 7 probably is where you're starting to see that number. If they can get to 8, they'd love that. I think if you go 8-4, I think they're thrilled with what they're able to do. I think 6 would put you in some treacherous territory, if you're this coaching staff, just because it has become the norm. And I think they're trying to break out of that by any way possible.
I think it's going to be 6-6. I'm staking the claim. There's a lot of uncertainty on offense. I do think the defense will be good. I do think the schedule helps a lot. I just don't know. I don't know how and I don't think, Matt, you cover the team every day. It doesn't seem like you have a great sense of what it's going to look like yet offensively. I mean, you mentioned it yourself with the scheme and, the personnel. I mean, we can guess on, some player, and you got, source reporting. I know all that. And you mentioned, where your lean is at some position groups, but there's just so much uncertainty. I just feel like even with this schedule, it does feel like 6-6 to me. I mean, Oregon State, like you mentioned out the gate, I don't think Oregon State's a walkover. I think that is a tough game, just given Cal's uncertainty on offense. Texas Southern, obviously, you should win that game. Minnesota is a little bit of a coin flip. You might be a dog there at home. At San Diego State, I think is a tricky one, like you mentioned. I think Cal should win that game. I do think it's tricky. Then you got to travel to BC, and BC's got their own questions. They're starting a transfer in Dylan Lonergan they announced this week, and we'll see what that looks like. They got their own questions. Duke could be quite good, even though you get them at home. Really, I think it's going to boil down to the second half of the schedule, really. How does Cal look in that North Carolina at Virginia Tech UVA stretch? I think people are looking at UVA a little bit like Cal. There's a lot of turnover, and they got a really soft schedule. So what gives there early November before you kind of finish out those last 3 games where you're going to be an underdog in 2 of them, and then the Stanford game's a rivalry game. Anything can happen. I think it's 6-6. That's where I'm at, and maybe that's not enough to keep Justin Wilcox's job, to your point. But that's kind of where I'm planting my flag. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't fight you on that. I think that's probably what I would pick right now. I'm gonna really dissect it once we get a chance to maybe learn a little bit more about this team and what it's actually going to look like. They're supposed to have a little bit more of a semblance of a depth chart here pretty soon, and so once we actually know kind of what it looks like, I think I'd probably but right now, based on what I know, what I've seen, going back to the spring, I think 6-6 is probably where it lands.
Yep.
I wouldn't be, if somebody wanted to say, hey, they're going to go 5-7, I probably wouldn't fight you on that one either. I think that's probably in that range. And I agree. I think that middle portion of the season is going to determine a lot about what happens, the rest of the way, obviously, but obviously in the offseason as well. If they can find some way to pull some victories out of that middle portion of the season, I think they're going to be in an okay spot. Probably, looking at another year of Justin Wilcox, maybe more than that if they are convincing, but they need to have some kind of progress. You can't feel like the same old Cal. That's the biggest thing. Whatever that means, you just can't look like the same old Cal. Maybe that means getting someone like Jaren into the game and having him have some of those flash moments and getting some excitement going and getting fans in the stands again because they want to see this star freshman. But we'll see. Again, could be Devin Brown, could be a revelation. Like, hey, he's finally getting his opportunity, and he's this guy that's really, maneuvering this offense that Brian Harsin has put together with Nick Rolovich and the rest of the staff. And like, it's something new that we haven't really seen before. And so I think there is some excitement about what it could look like based on who they have on their staff.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, I think, is going to come down to what does the offense look like? But again, kind of like every other team for a lot of ways, what happens at the quarterback position?
Yeah.
If Devin Brown is good and looks like a true, top tier quarterback, it's a different conversation because then that changes, I think, a lot about what they can do offensively. And as we mentioned before, the defense is going to look, how it's looked, I think, under Justin Wilcox for every year. And so a lot of it, I've been telling people this, is going to be dependent on what the offense looks like. If the offense is good and that a lot of that is going to come from Devin Brown, whoever is playing starting quarterback, like that changes the complexion of what the season could look like. So that's where a lot of the eyes and the focus and attention will be when they take the field against Oregon State for sure, is what does the quarterback look like?
Yeah. I think that'll really determine how the season goes. That, and of course, the reworked offensive line. I think though you can find skill guys, you really can. It's quarterback and offensive line mean a whole heck of a lot at the pro level too, but especially at the college level. Matt, really appreciate it. I want to give you an opportunity to plug all your stuff. Obviously, very informative preview. So thanks for joining us once again.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find all of our stuff at goldenbearreport.com. We are now on the On3 Rivals Network. Obviously, the acquisition that happened over the summer kind of changed some things for all of us. But you can find us on Twitter, X, Cal Bears On3. Find all of the coverage there. And like I said, check us out at goldenbearreport.com.
Matt, really appreciate it. We'll check in sometime during the season, I think, because it's going to be an interesting one to follow in the ACC. One of the more intriguing teams, given everything that's going on. So we'll definitely have to have you back on.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Awesome. Well, that's Matt Moreno. We'll be back. Just really informative Cal preview, so really appreciate his time. We will be back previewing more teams. Season previews roll on. We have a few teams left to go through. Week 0 is quickly approaching. We have a Stanford game, Matt. Stanford's coming up week 0, so we got an ACC game the very first week of the season. So that'll be something to watch in league play. You can follow us on Twitter, X, at BC Podcast ACC. Go check out YouTube, of course, youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. Please continue to subscribe and support us over there. But until next time, for Mr. Matt Moreno, I'm Mike McDaniel. Go Bears and go ACC.